The family courtroom felt too big and too loud, even when it was quiet. It was a room built for grown-up. Words like petition and custody and best interests. But sitting in the very middle of it all was a little girl who hadn't spoken a single word to anyone outside her mother. For nearly 5 months. Her name was Maya, and she was 7 years old. She sat on a wooden bench that was too high for her small legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor. Her shiny black shoes swung back and forth, a tiny nervous movement. On her right sat her mother, Elena. Elena kept one hand resting on her daughter's back, a steady, warm pressure. Her face was tight with worry, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like someone who had cried all her tears and was now just holding on. On Maya's left sat her father, David. He sat up very straight in his suit, his jaw firm. He would occasionally look down at Maya and try to give her a small, reassuring smile. But the smile never quite reached his eyes, which kept flicking toward the judge and his own lawyer. Sharp and focused, the argument buzzing back and forth between the lawyers was about schedules and houses and jobs. But the real fight, the one that hung in the air like a storm cloud, was about who loved Maya more. Who was the better parent? Each side said the other was wrong, unfit, a danger. The words were like thrown stones, clattering around the high ceiling. Maya did not understand most of the legal words. But she understood the feeling. She understood the tightness in her mother's hand. She understood the new, strange coldness in her father's voice when he spoke about her mom. It made her feel like she was being pulled in too, and it was so scary that the words had just locked inside her. Her therapist called it selective mutism. For Maya, it just felt like a thick, safe blanket of silence she could hide in. The only thing that didn't feel like it was splitting apart was Cody. Cody was a big, golden-colored dog with fur that felt like sunshine. He was her therapy dog, her best friend. He lay curled on the floor by her feet, a heavy, warm weight against her legs. The judge, a serious man with kind eyes behind his glasses, had allowed Cody to come into the courtroom after a long letter from Maya's doctor. The letter explained that Cody was Maya's voice when she had none. Maya's small fingers were buried deep in the soft fur of Cody's neck. This was their secret connection. As her father's lawyer, a man with a loud, booming voice, stood up, Maya's grip tightened just a little. "Your Honor," the lawyer boomed, "we have documented several instances where the mother has been emotionally unstable. Outbursts, unpredictable moods in front of the child. This is not a calm environment for a young, sensitive girl." Elena sucked in a quiet breath next to her. Maya felt her mother's body go stiff. She didn't look up, but she could feel the hurt coming from her mom like a wave of heat. Her father nodded slowly, looking sad and serious, as if the lawyer's words pained him too. Then it was her mother's lawyer's turn. She was a younger woman with a much softer voice. "Your Honor, my client's so-called instability is the direct result of the pressure and intimidation she faced in her marriage. She is a caring, devoted mother. The same cannot be said for Mr. Reynolds, whose new job requires 70-hour weeks. Who will care for Maya? She will be alone, neglected." Now it was her father's turn to react. David shook his head, a flush of red creeping up his neck. "That is a lie," he said, his voice low but hard. The lawyers kept talking, their voices weaving a net of worries around Maya. Words like alone and unstable and neglected swirled in the air. Maya's world had become these two angry sides, with her stuck in the cold, quiet middle. She pressed her face closer to Cody's head, hiding in his familiar soapy smell. The trembling in her hand, hidden in his fur, became a little shake. Cody shifted his head and nudged her palm gently with his wet nose, a quiet question. But Maya didn't make a sound. She just held on, her heart beating a scared little rhythm against her ribs, waiting for the next loud voice, the next scary word, in the big, loud room that was deciding the rest of her life. The soft-voiced lawyer for Maya's mother was asking questions now. She walked slowly toward the witness stand where Maya's father sat. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her tone polite but firm, "you've stated that your new promotion is a great opportunity for your family. Can you tell the court what your typical workday will look like?" David straightened his tie. He spoke directly to the judge, not the lawyer. "It's a leadership role, Your Honor. It requires dedication. I might be at the office from 8 in the morning until 7 or 8 at night. Sometimes later if there's a big project. But that's why it's so important. It provides stability. And who will be with Maya between the end of her school day at 3:30 and the time you return home, perhaps at 8 or 9? She's a bright, independent girl," David said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "She can do her homework. There's a neighbor. We'll arrange aftercare." The lawyer let a silence hang in the air for a moment. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Maya's fingers still moved slowly in Cody's fur. "So, for approximately 15 to 20 hours a week, your 7-year-old daughter will be in the care of neighbors or after-school programs, while you are at this demanding new job you've taken on during an active custody dispute." David's composure began to crack. The polite mask slipped. "This is what you do," he said, his voice rising and pointed at Maya's mother. "You twist things. You make everything sound terrible. I am fighting for my daughter." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Reynolds, please address the questions from counsel." David took a deep breath, but the anger was still there, hot and close to the surface. Maya knew this tone. It was a tone that made her want to become very small and very quiet. She slowly lifted her head from Cody's fur, just enough to peek over the table. Her father's lawyer stood up quickly. "Your Honor, my client is simply passionate about being a father. This line of questioning is designed to provoke him." The judge waved a hand, allowing Maya's mother's lawyer to continue. She took a step closer. "Passion is one thing, Mr. Reynolds, but isn't it true that your passion often turns to anger? That when you are frustrated, you have a temper?" "No." David slammed his open hand down on the wooden railing of the witness stand. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Bang, everyone jumped. The bailiff shifted his stance. Maya's mother flinched, grabbing the edge of the table. And Maya? The sound right through her. It wasn't just the noise. It was the final, sharp proof of everything she was afraid of. The loud voices, the hard words, the scary bang. It was all here, in this room, just like it had sometimes been at home. The world shrank to that sound and the red, angry face of her father. For months. Her therapist had worked with her and Cody. They had practiced for moments when the fear was too big, when the words wouldn't come, when the world felt unsafe. "This is just for emergencies, sweetie," the therapist had said. "When you feel so scared you can't breathe, and you need help, but you can't say it. You tell Cody. He knows what to do." They had a secret signal dot as David glared at the lawyer, his chest heaving. Maya moved dot. It was so small, so fast. Her left hand was still buried in the soft, thick fur at the scruff of Cody's neck. She curled her fingers in, making a soft fist. Then, with a pressure so light you would have to be the dog to feel it, she tapped twice. A pause, then twice again. Asterisk, tap dash tap. Tap tap. Asterisk, it was their code. It meant, "I am scared. Help me." For a second, nothing happened. Cody was still. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Did he feel it? Did he remember? Then Cody's head lifted. He turned and looked right at Maya, his big brown eyes usually so sleepy and gentle, or clear and alert. He had been dozing, but he was awake now. Fully awake in one smooth movement, the big dog got to his feet. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. Not yet. He did exactly what he was trained to do. He placed his large, warm body directly between Maya and the source of the loud, scary noise, the witness stand where her father sat. He was a living, furry wall. The movement caught David's eye. He looked down, confused. "Cody?" he said, his voice still rough with anger. The lawyer was asking another question, but no one was listening anymore. All the adults in the room were now watching the dog. Cody turned his head, looking from Maya's frightened face to David's confused one. He lowered his head, his eyes fixed on David. A deep, rumbling sound started in his chest, so low it was almost more of a vibration than a noise. It was a warning growl, long and steady. The growl cut through the last of the legal arguments. The judge, who had been watching the entire exchange with a sharp eye, straightened up in his tall chair. His gaze moved from the growling dog to the terrified, silent child on the bench, and then to the father, whose face was shifting from anger to something else, something that looked a lot like panic in that moment. The fancy words stopped mattering. The arguments about schedules and jobs evaporated. There was only a child, a secret signal, and a dog who was speaking the only truth that seemed to matter right now. The room held its breath. The low growl from Cody seemed to suck all the other sound right out of the courtroom. That steady, rumbling warning was the only thing anyone could hear. For a few seconds, everyone was frozen, trying to understand what was happening. Maya's father, David, looked down at the dog, his angry expression melting into pure confusion. "Hey," he said, his voice much quieter now. "Cody, boy, it's okay." He moved his hand slightly, as if to gesture for the dog to settle, but Cody didn't settle. The growl continued, a clear, unwavering sound. The dog's body was tense, a solid barrier of muscle and fur, planted firmly on the courtroom floor. His eyes were locked on David, not blinking. The judge was the first to break the spell. He was an older man who had seen many, many arguments in his courtroom. He had seen people cry, shout, and lie. But he had never seen a therapy dog behave like this. He leaned forward, his glasses slipping down his nose a little. He wasn't looking at the lawyers anymore. He was looking at the scene in front of him like a puzzle he needed to solve. "Mr. Reynolds," the judge said, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the growl. "Do not move toward the dog." David's hand stopped in midair. He looked from the judge to Cody, his confusion turning to a dawning, sick understanding. He slowly put his hand back in his lap. The judge's eyes then shifted to Maya. The little girl had pressed herself against her mother's side, her small face pale. She was staring at Cody, her eyes wide. She wasn't crying. She wasn't making a sound. She was just watching, her breath coming in little, quiet hitches that shook her shoulders. "Bailiff," the judge said, not raising his voice. The tall officer standing near the door took a step forward. "Please ensure everyone remains calm and in their place." The bailiff nodded and moved to a position where he could see the whole room. His presence was steady and watchful. The judge then looked at Maya's mother, Elena. She had wrapped an arm tightly around her daughter, her own face a mask of shock and fear. But there was something else in her eyes, too, a painful kind of recognition. "Ma'am," the judge said to her, his tone a little softer, "did you see what prompted the dog to react this way?" Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out for a moment. She swallowed hard. I saw her hand move. In his fur. Just a little. And then he just got up." "Her hand moved how?" the judge asked. "I don't know. A twitch?" It was so small. Elena looked down at her daughter, her heart breaking. She has a signal. For when she's too scared, her therapist taught them. For emergencies. A heavy silence followed her words. The word emergency hung in the air. An emergency here, in this courtroom. David shook his head, his voice desperate now. Your Honor, this is nonsense. The dog is confused. All the stress in the room. He's picking up on everyone's anxiety. He's never done this before. He tried to sound reasonable, but the panic was there, edging his words. But the judge wasn't looking at him. He was watching Cody. The dog had not stopped his low growl. He hadn't looked away. This wasn't a confused animal. This was a dog on a mission. A dog doing a job he had been trained to do. The judge had a granddaughter about Maya's age. He thought about what it would take for a child who loved her dog to use a secret emergency signal. He thought about the sound of a hand slamming on wood, a sound so sharp it had made everyone in the room jump. He remembered the little girl flinching, hiding her face, and then that tiny, deliberate movement of her hand. This wasn't about work schedules or who packed a better lunch. This was about a sound. A loud, sudden, angry sound. And a child's reaction to it. He made a decision. He picked up his gavel, a serious look on his face. This court is in recess, he announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. The sound of the gavel hitting the block was soft but final. Tap. He pointed to David, who was starting to stand up. Mr. Reynolds, you will remain seated right where you are. Do not approach your daughter or the dog at this time. He then looked at the bailiff. Please escort the child and the dog to my chambers. Her mother will come with them. Now, please. He then turned to a woman sitting at a separate table, a court liaison from Child Services. I would like you to join them. Finally, he looked at the two lawyers, who were staring at him, stunned. Counsel, he said. My chambers. In 5 minutes? The courtroom, which had been so still, suddenly buzzed to life with whispered confusion. David slumped back into the witness chair, his head in his hands. The lawyers gathered their papers, talking in low, urgent tones, but Maya saw none of it. She felt her mother's arm guiding her up. She kept her eyes on Cody, the dog, hearing the calm authority in the judge's voice, and seeing Maya begin to move, finally stopped growling. He turned and nudged her hand with his nose, as if to say, Asterisk, I'm here. It's okay, Asterisk. He stayed glued to her side as the bailiff led them through a quiet side door, away from the staring eyes, away from her father, and into the silence of the judge's private hallway. The loud fight was over for now. But a new, much more important conversation was about to begin. And this time, Maya wouldn't need words. Her friend Cody had already said everything that needed to be said. The judge's chambers were nothing like the courtroom. It was a quieter, smaller room, filled with books and the soft light from a large window. The loud, scary feeling was left behind in the big room with the high ceiling. Here, the air was still, and the only sounds were the quiet hum of a computer and the tick of a clock on the wall. Maya, her mother, and Cody were led in by the bailiff. The woman from Child Services, Mrs. Allen, followed them. She had a kind face, but her eyes were sharp and observant. The judge came in a moment later, taking off his black robe and hanging it on a hook. Without it, he looked less like a powerful figure and more like a tired grandfather. He motioned for them to sit on a small, comfortable sofa. Maya's mother sat, pulling Maya close. Cody immediately lay down at Maya's feet, putting his head heavily on her shoes. A living weight to keep her grounded. The judge did not sit behind his big desk. Instead, he pulled a chair over and sat near them, making himself lower. He wanted to look at Maya without looking down on her. Maya, he said, his voice gentle, My name is Judge Mercer. This is a safe room. No one is going to be loud in here. No one is going to get angry. Do you understand?" Maya looked at him, then at her mother. Her mother gave a small, encouraging nod. Maya looked back at the judge and gave a tiny nod of her own. "Good," the judge said. He took a slow breath. "What your dog did out there? Cody, that was very important. He was telling us something. He was telling us you were scared. Weren't you?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. She nodded again, a little more surely. "Can you tell me," the judge asked carefully, "what you were scared of?" Maya's lips pressed together. She looked at her hands in her lap. The words were still locked away, a wall she couldn't climb over. Her mother, Elena, smoothed her daughter's hair. "Sweetie, it's okay. You can show him. You can show him your signal." Maya looked up at the judge, then down at Cody. Very slowly, she curled the fingers of her left hand into a soft fist. She reached over and with the lightest touch, tapped twice on Cody's shoulder. Tap, tap, a pause. Then again. Tap, tap. The effect was instant. Cody's head lifted. He got to his feet and turned, placing himself between Maya and the door, the only entrance, the only possible source of a new threat. He didn't growl here in the quiet room, but his posture was clear, alert, protective, and watchful. Judge Mercer watched it all. He didn't interrupt. He just let the simple, powerful action speak. "I see," he said softly, once Cody had settled back down. "He is very well trained, and you are very brave to have a signal like that." He paused. "Maya, does that signal mean you are scared of a loud noise? Like the sound in the courtroom?" Maya nodded. "Do you hear that loud noise? Or other loud noises? Sometimes at your dad's house?" A tear finally escaped and rolled down Maya's cheek. She nodded. It was a small, heartbreaking movement. The judge looked at Mrs. Allen, the child services worker. Her face was solemn. She understood what this meant. "Maya," Mrs. Allen said, her voice soft, "does the loud noise sometimes come from your dad? When he gets upset?" Maya didn't nod this time. She buried her face in her mother's side. But that was an answer, too. The judge leaned back in his chair, his face grim. He had heard enough from Maya for now. He didn't need to frighten her further. He looked at Elena, her therapist, he said. "We will need to speak with her, immediately, and we will need the training records for the dog, explaining this specific signal protocol." Elena nodded, holding her daughter tightly. "Of course, anything." Just then, there was a soft knock on the door. The bailiff stepped in. "Your Honor, the attorneys are here." "Send them in," the judge said. His gentle tone was gone, replaced by the steady voice of a man who had seen a truth he could not ignore. The two lawyers walked in, looking tense. The judge did not let them speak first. "What we just witnessed in my courtroom was not a dog misbehaving," he began, his voice low and serious. "It was a communication. A child, who has been rendered silent by fear, used the only tool she had to ask for help. And that tool told us, quite clearly, that she associates her father's anger, demonstrated by that slammed hand, with immediate danger." David's lawyer started to speak. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is speculation based on an animal's behavior. It is not speculation." The judge interrupted, his voice rising just a fraction before he controlled it. He glanced at Maya, making sure he hadn't scared her. He continued, more quietly, but with even more force. "It is evidence, corroborated by the child's nonverbal testimony and her documented mutism. We will be adjourning the public hearing. I am ordering an immediate child custody evaluation, with a focus on the father's anger management and the child's felt sense of safety. Until that evaluation is complete, temporary full custody remains with the mother." Visitation with the father will be suspended. He looked at both lawyers, his gaze final. This case is no longer about who has a better work schedule. It is about why a 7-year-old girl needs a secret signal to feel safe from her own father. We will now work to answer that question. Court is adjourned. In the quiet of the chambers, with the legal words hanging in the air, the most important sound was a little girl finally letting out a long, shaky breath, her small hand resting safely on the head of the dog who had, at last, spoken for her. The weeks that followed the day in the judge's chambers were not easy, but they were quiet. The loud, frightening fight was over. For now, there was only peace in the small apartment where Maya lived with her mother. The silence there was different. It was not the scary, locked-up silence of before. It was a soft, healing quiet, broken by the sound of her mother humming in the kitchen, or the gentle snoring of Cody on the rug. A judge's order changed everything. The battle moved out of the bright, public courtroom and into the calmer, more private offices of specialists. A kind woman named Dr. Evans, who specialized in helping children, began to meet with Maya. At first, they just played with clay and drew pictures. Cody was always there, a warm presence by her side. Slowly, with the dog's head in her lap, Maya began to whisper a word or two to the doctor. She didn't talk about the loud noises yet. She talked about Cody. She talked about her favorite book. It was a start. A different doctor, a calm man, began to meet with Maya's father, David. It was called a court-ordered evaluation. He had to talk about his temper, about stress, about his own childhood. He had to learn that wanting to be a good father wasn't enough. He had to learn new ways to feel frustration without letting it turn into something that could slam tables and scare little girls. One sunny afternoon, Maya and her mother returned to the courthouse. But they didn't go to the big courtroom. They went back to Judge Mercer's quiet chambers. He was there, along with Mrs. Allen from Child Services and the 2 lawyers. The air was serious, but it didn't feel dangerous. Judge Mercer had the reports in front of him. He looked at Maya, who was holding her mother's hand tightly, Cody sitting alertly beside her. "Maya," the judge said, giving her a small, kind smile. "Thank you for coming to see me today. I've been talking to the doctors, and I've read all about how brave you've been." Maya just watched him, her big eyes taking everything in. The judge turned his attention to the adults. "The evaluations are complete," he began. His voice was thoughtful. "The child's therapist confirms that her mutism is directly tied to episodes of acute fear, specifically related to sudden, aggressive sounds and raised voices. Her progress in a stable, calm environment has been, and I quote, remarkable." He then looked at the report concerning David. "The father," the judge continued, "has engaged with the evaluation process. He acknowledges issues with anger management and has begun a structured program. However, the therapist notes it is early days. The trust that was broken has not yet been rebuilt." David's lawyer spoke up, his voice much softer than it had been in the big courtroom. "Your Honor, my client is committed to this change. He loves his daughter deeply. He is asking for a chance to rebuild that trust, under supervision." The judge nodded slowly. He already knew what he had to do. His job wasn't to punish. His job was to protect and to find a way forward if one was safe. "The law," Judge Mercer said, "always puts the child's safety and well-being first. What happened here was a little girl telling us, in the only way she could, that she was not safe. We must listen to that." He took off his glasses and looked at Maya's mother. "Elena, you have provided the stable, loving environment Maya needs to heal. Temporary full custody is now made permanent. You will have the sole right to make decisions about her schooling, her health, and her life." A tear of relief rolled down Elena's cheek. She squeezed Maya's hand. "However," the judge said, turning next to where David sat, looking pale but attentive. A child also has a right to know her father, if that relationship can be safe and healthy. Therefore, I am ordering a very specific path forward. He laid out the rules one by one. David would have no visitation at all until he completed the first full phase of his anger management program. Then, and only then, would supervised visitation begin. Not in his home. In a special neutral center with a trained monitor present. The visits would be short, and they would focus on quiet activities. No raised voices. No sudden movements. And critically, for the first several visits, Cody the dog would be present. If Maya felt scared, she had her signal. Cody was her safety. This is not a punishment, Mr. Reynolds, the judge said firmly. This is a necessity. It is a bridge. Whether you get to cross it fully will depend entirely on your actions, your patience, and your daughter's sense of safety. Do you understand? David nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He looked at Maya, and for the first time, his look was not one of anger or frustration, but of a sad, dawning understanding of the fear he had caused. Judge Mercer brought down his gavel one last time, a soft tap on his desk. So ordered. As they all stood to leave, something unexpected happened. Maya let go of her mother's hand. She took a small step forward toward the judge's big desk. She looked up at him, and then very clearly, she mouthed two silent words. Thank you. Judge Mercer's eyes grew a little wet. He simply nodded back to her dot outside in the hallway. The sunlight streamed through the windows. Maya walked between her mother and her dog. The grown-ups talked in low voices behind them, but their words were about schedules and centers and programs. They were not scary words anymore. Maya reached down and scratched behind Cody's ear. He leaned into her hand, his tail waving slowly like a happy flag. She didn't give the secret signal. She didn't need to. The emergency was over. She knew the road ahead was long. There would be quiet visits in strange rooms. There would be hard work for her Gad. There would be more talks with Dr. Evans. But the terrifying, pulling apart feeling was gone. The secret was out. Her friend Cody had helped her tell it. And the people who were supposed to listen finally had. She held her mother's hand and walked out of the courthouse into the warm, bright day. She was not silent because she was afraid. She was just quiet because for the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't have to scream without making a sound. She was safe, and that was enough.